Tons of questions and very few answers for the St. Louis Cardinals after being swept out of Queens by the Mets. We'll talk about it coming up on B-Schaeff Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is Sunday, April 20th, 2025. Happy Easter to everybody out there, and I'm sorry the Cardinals left some apparently rotten eggs in your baskets, as the Cardinals are swept in 4 out of Queens by the New York Mets this weekend, culminating in a 7-4 loss on Sunday. Oh, my goodness. Well, it happened. I mean, the concerns of, hey, the Cardinals and their road record, in that first road trip, they went 1-5. Is there anything to it? Can the Cardinals right the ship with this road trip? And the answer so far has been no. Cardinals dropped to 9-13 on the season. They dropped to 1-9 on the road. And it is a bona fide thing at this point, because we can talk about the stats. We can talk about individual performances. We can talk about why things might not be as bad as they seem. Like, we could play that game. And if I had to guess my personal opinion, like whatever the Cardinals' win percentage is right now at this moment, I think they'll probably finish better than that this season. So even as I tell you, I don't think it's as bad as it seems. The numbers are the numbers, and the record is the record. Cardinals right now on pace to win 66 games and lose 96. So I don't think they'll be that bad when it's all said and done, but they're that bad at this point. Like, we had this feeling about the Cardinal team through the first homestand where we said, hey, maybe they're better than you think. And then they sort of faded out. And then they had the second homestand where they looked really good again against the Phillies and the Astros, two teams that generally are believed to be pretty good ball clubs. And things perked up again. The feeling around this Cardinals team perked up a little bit. But then they go back out on the road, and the Mets kicked their asses for 4 days. You know, they just were not on the level of the New York Mets this weekend, plain and simple. And if we're evaluating this in a production-based business, the Cardinals are not producing. They're not doing enough at this point to earn that benefit of the doubt, right? So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. This was a bitter one. 7-4, Cardinals had a chance in this game, as they have in several of these losses. You got decent enough starting pitching from Sonny Gray. Quality start, not his best outing by any means. Gave up a home run in this game, but he goes 6, gives up 6 hits, 3 runs, all earned, a walk and 6 strikeouts, 102 pitches, so he was going deeper into this game in terms of pitch count, trying to get his team over the hump. And when he departed the game, the Cardinals were trailing, but they mounted a comeback just after Sonny Gray's departure. Top of the 7th inning, Cardinals come up with a couple of runs and take him off the hook. 3-3 ball game. Once again, Thomas Saggese with the big swing there. It was his only hit of the day, but it was a 2 RBI double. And Saggese's now at a 400 batting average, 989 OPS. Oliver Marmol, by the way, moving Thomas Saggese up into the 2-hole. I think you can expect to see Thomas Saggese remain with the Cardinals after the return of Mason Wynn. Don't know what it's going to look like in the daily lineup, but Thomas Saggese's not going back to Memphis. He's just not. I mean, and for those who would say, I don't know, I don't really trust the front office. I don't really trust John Mozeliak. What's going to happen here? I'm just going to tell you, John Mozeliak is not sending Thomas Saggese back to Memphis. And if I'm wrong, we'll have a very critical podcast the next day. I'm just letting you know it's not going to happen. I just don't see any way it can happen. Who they send down instead, honestly, doesn't really matter. Of course it matters, but it's just details. Thomas Saggese's been one of your better performers for the time being. I'm not saying it grants him a lifetime leash into the daily starting lineup, but that's a guy that's performed well enough to deserve continued opportunities. We'll see the direction they decide to go with it. I could give you 5 names, though, that I would be sending down before Saggese. Again, I think we talked yesterday about, could Luken Baker's role be kind of folded into what Saggese brings? Michael Ciani, would they go a different route with him? Although he ended up 1 for 1 today, scoring a couple of runs, came in as a pinch runner at first, and then scored in that instance and went 1-for-1, scoring in his only at-bat of the game, too. So, or after his only at-bat of the game. So, good for Michael Ciani. Again, I don't necessarily know that he would be the choice. Some have even wondered Victor Scott really, really tailing off, and it's true. Was 0-for-2 today and then was lifted for a pinch hitter. And that's why Ciani came into the game to run for Luke and Baker after he walked. So maybe it's, spell some time for Victor Scott. We haven't yet seen Lars Nootbaar in center field this year. Is there a lane toward that potentially happening and kind of looking at what a different looking lineup could be if the center field production is not enough? We'll see. Gorman was the third baseman today with Arenado getting a day off. He was 1-for-4, scored a run. There's some who would say that he should be the guy that gets sent down. Jordan Walker was 0-for-4 with 3 strikeouts. You could, like I said, there's a handful of names that I think when Mason Wynn returns on, I think it's Tuesday he's coming back or eligible to do so, and he'll be back the moment he's eligible. It's not Sajaci. It could be any of the other 6 guys. Burleson even. 1-for-4, 2 strikeouts. Had an RBI today, but his OPS is 601. Like, I don't... You wake up one day, you look up, and you go, now, wait a minute. What's going on with about half this Cardinal lineup all of a sudden? Burleson's at 601. Walker's at 604. Those two combined for 5 Ks on Sunday. Gorman's down to 720 on the OPS, but like I said, had a 1-for-4 day today. Pajez's bat has cooled, but he's your catcher, right? You're waiting for Herrera to get back, and Herrera's going to play plenty when he does get back. But he was 0-for-3, did reach via walk. Victor's down to 641 with his OPS, hitting 235. Lars Nootbaar sub-800 on the OPS, but still pretty solid at 797. Like, you'd take that if that's his number. Wilson is coming around. He was your cleanup man today, 2-for-4, closing in on a 200 batting mark and a 500 OPS. Not what you want, but he's moving in the right direction, and I have plenty of confidence that he's going to eventually get there. But, yeah, you look up all of a sudden in this Cardinal offense where we've been touting and talking about, well, here are their ranks league-wide. Not a lot of names in this lineup at this exact moment that you're feeling super good about as the Cardinals get ready to trek to Atlanta for the continuation of this road trip. 1-9 on the road. I could sit here all day and tell you this Cardinals team's got talent, and I believe that to be true, but 1-9 is 1-9. And 9-13 is 9-13. So there's no sugarcoating that. There's no, well, here's how I can explain it away. That was a bad sweep, man. They were close in some of these games. They were close today. You tie it up at 3, and then there's the run given back. No shutdown inning. Jojo Romero, the victim this time. Gave up a run, only recorded 1 out. It's a couple of times in a row, at least now that we have seen him not do his job when he comes into a game. Happened earlier in the series where he walked a couple of guys, and that was the game that you lose 5-4. And you look up at the end and say, well, it's Ryan Fernandez's fault when he gives up the home run to Lindor. Sure. But an example earlier in that game of the bullpen not doing its job, and I get it, relievers aren't going to have a 100% success rate, but I would point to JoJo in that game walking a couple of batters of the 3 that he faced and say that threw the rest of the bullpen plan off kilter. And it was the same story today. A hit and a walk, and ends up getting charged with an earned run, records 1 out via strikeout. But Phil Maton comes in. Too many rescue missions during this weekend series in New York. Maton inherits the situation from JoJo, gives up a hit, and allows that inherited runner to score, one of the two. Did have a couple of strikeouts, and Maton's still sitting with a 0 ERA on the season because the runs he gave up the other day were unearned. But even then, the Cardinals aren't out of it on Sunday because they're only down by 1 run. All right, bottom of the 8th inning, got to keep it there and give yourself a crack at it in the 9th, which, spoiler alert, the Cardinals do end up scoring a run in the 9th inning. But in the bottom of the 8th, Ryan Fernandez gives up 3 earned runs, 3 hits, and a walk. You could point to and say, oh, well, one of the hits down the right field line was just kind of a bleeding blooper over the first baseman, bad luck. Batted ball in play, finds a hole. Sure. What about the walk? His command was just not there. And I don't know what the plan is. I know that this is a guy Oliver Marmol really likes and trusts, and that trust was forged last year, and it was well-earned. But right now, the Cardinals have got to recognize that he's not right. Ryan Fernandez is not at his best. And I see comments from people saying, oh, DFA. It's always DFA a guy, right? DFAing Ryan Fernandez would be remarkably dumb. Cardinals aren't going to do that because he has options. But should the Cardinals option Ryan Fernandez to Memphis? Absolutely, yes. Are they going to? I don't know. I think so, but I can't say for sure. And I'm not saying all the answers lie within the Memphis Redbird bullpen either, that you're just going to call the next guy up and he's going to be nails. But at a certain point, I don't think you're doing Ryan Fernandez any good, and I don't think Ryan Fernandez is doing the St. Louis Cardinals any good. He's just not at his best right now. The dude's got an 11 ERA. It is what it is. I think there's more in there, but I don't think you're going to necessarily power through this little rut that he's in and find it at the big league level. I think there's no shame in saying, hey, sometimes we got to let a guy go find it somewhere else. Chris Roycroft has gone down to Memphis, and he's working to find it down there. Whether or not he'll be successful, time will tell. But I think that's the way that this needs to go. And by the way, we'll do a little down on the farm. Riley O'Brien had a scoreless inning in the game for Memphis on Sunday. 3 strikeouts, no walks, no hits. Riley O'Brien as a temporary solution, or maybe not so temporary. A guy with some real stuff type potential. Bring him up and see what he can do. Don't waste the bullets in Memphis on Riley O'Brien. You don't know how long he'll be healthy either. It's been kind of an issue for him, durability. So to me, that's the move that has to be made before the start of play on Monday. And I don't usually spell it out that plainly, but that's what I believe the Cardinals should do. I'm in this business to share my opinions at times. I feel this is an appropriate time to go, look, it's just not happening right now for Ryan Fernandez. I think he will be an important pitcher for the Cardinals in 2025. I don't know if that's going to happen in April. You're swimming upstream at this point, and that's a John Mozeliak move, right? Like, you can have the coaching staff and the manager say, hey, this is a guy that, we need to ride with. I think at a certain point the front office can say, all right, we're still swapping things out because we're trying to find the right mix for the bullpen. No shame in that either. So if I'm the Cardinals, that's the move that I think needs to be made. Let me know your thoughts on it, Cardinals fans. But, Riley has a 3.86 ERA in Memphis. I'm not saying that he's going to come up and be the answer, but I don't think that's a reason not to do something. To say, well, we don't know for sure that the next guy's going to come up and be any good. No, of course you don't. But I can tell you that the guy who's currently in the role has not performed in it, and he's kind of gone through the levels, right? This was a situation today where people would say, well, Oliver Marmol, what's he doing? How could you bring in Ryan Fernandez? Because we know he's struggled and you're in this game. How could you do that? Folks, they were down 4-3. It's simple. You have your group of relievers that you can turn to when a game is tied or you're ahead, and you've got a separate group of guys for when you're behind. Sometimes there's obviously some overlap there. And in this instance, you saw JoJo come into a tie game. He starts to cough it up. Maton comes in. They're trying to keep it tied. He couldn't quite do so. Now you're down by a run. In weeks past, maybe that's the Leahy spot. Maybe that's a Matt Swanson spot. You're down. You have to have somebody that you have some level of trust in, but you're trying to keep it 4-3 because you're not out of the game when choosing a reliever for that bottom of the 8th inning. But frankly, that it's Fernandez, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but that even suggests to an extent, like, all right, that's a demotion already. He's pitching when you're down. Normally, coming into the year, we would have told you he's your 8th inning guy for when it's a right-handed situation. JoJo's your best setup man from the left side. And now Maton, I think, has supplanted any other righty not named Helsley in that bullpen in terms of reliability recently, even with giving up a couple of unearned runs or whatever it had been the other day. Maton's done a really nice job. Fernandez was pitching and you're trailing, right? This was a spot that is a little bit less leveragey than what he has previously been trusted with, is the point I'm trying to make. And so you have to be able to, if Ryan Fernandez is going to be on your team, which he was on the team today, his role is going to be either powering through and being one of those guys that you trust in a close game that you're tied by the 7th or 8th inning, or you're ahead by 1 or 2, and you're trying to find your setup guys to get to bridge that gap to Helsley. But in this case, you're down 4-3, and Ollie Marmol says, all right, that's fine. Like, it's not a waste of energy to use a guy like this because, A, maybe he'll find it back in a slightly lower leverage spot because he could do his job and the Cardinals could still lose 4-3. The problem is they scored in the 9th, and so it looks even worse because you would say, well, how could they do that? Well, it's not like it was the spot for Ryan Helsley. I get it. Ryan Helsley didn't pitch in this series and he lost 4 games. That's a bad look. That's bad optics, 100%. You're not going to throw Ryan Helsley in the 4-3 spot when you're down by a run, all right? That's what I like to call hindsight theater. We're not doing that. However, and Ollie Marmol, would insist to the contrary, and I respect that he would. Looking back on it, you go, yeah, it might have been nice to throw Helsley in the 9th inning of that tied game the other day. And we talked about it ad nauseum. It wasn't a consideration. It wasn't the direction they were going to go. Very traditional way of handling the closer position, which is fine. And I'm even falling victim a little bit to the hindsight theater by then saying, well, now I know the way that Saturday and Sunday played out and that you didn't even get a chance to use Helsley. But coming into those 2 games, let's be honest, it didn't have a great feel with Kodai Senga and Clay Holmes opposing the Cardinals. You just didn't necessarily think this was going to be a robust series. I said it going in, try to split it, get 2 of 4, and that would be a huge win. I don't remember if I said that on B-Schaeff Daily or if that was on the big show, KTGR, which, by the way, if you're listening to this episode of B-Schaeff Daily on Monday, tune in on the KTGR app 4 p.m. because we'll have a lot more Cardinal talk on that show from 4 to 6 on Monday because I'm hosting it with just our producer. My normal co-host, Andy, is out for Monday. So lots of Cardinals talk since obviously that's a big part of what I bring to the table. Nevertheless, a split would have been fantastic. Why did I say that coming into the series? Because I saw the pitching that was coming. I didn't necessarily think the Cardinal offense was going to be in this type of rut to this extent. But when you line up Griffin Canning, David Peterson, Kodai Senga, and Clay Holmes, I thought, yeah, that's got the making of you dropping 3 of 4. But I didn't know that Griffin Canning was going to shut you down and strike you out 8 times either. That was the one that I would have said the most gettable. And you had Palante on the hill, and he was, prior to this weekend, the guy you maybe felt the best about with his early starts in the rotation. Now, I still think Palante is doing just fine. It was 1 inning that got him, but 1 inning ends up being costly. Cardinals are in a tough spot right here as they go into Atlanta. And that's a Braves team that, yes, we've talked about. They're down on their luck a little bit to start the season. They don't have the record that they thought they would. But at home, they've been nails. Like, you're getting them on their turf. The Braves are 8-13, so you might think, oh boy, here we go. No. That's not the case. Braves are 6-2 at home. You must think, my goodness, how are they so bad overall when they're that good at home? I don't know. Look at the Cardinals. It's the same thing. The Braves are 2-11 on the road. The Cardinals are 1-9 on the road. They're basically the same team so far, and unfortunately, Cardinals have to play this series at their place, Truist Park. So, good luck. The Braves have been playing really well at home. Cardinals, we know what's been happening to them on the road, and it's hard to necessarily pin it down today and say, oh, the offense stinks. Well, they got to 4 runs. Get to 5 would be my recommendation because this pitching staff and the bullpen, I think, is who I'd pin it on this weekend more than anybody. You could look back at the way that this series played out, and I think this Cardinal bullpen has really been the primary reason that this went as far south as it did. I'd put the offense right there, too, as the secondary reason. And then the rotation, honestly, wasn't that bad. All things considered, I mean, there's a potent portion of that Mets lineup, which was the portion that got you this weekend. When you look at the 1-2-3 of Alonso, Soto, Francisco Lindor, Soto, Alonso, those guys were responsible for all the Mets runs, it felt like. Let's see, they had 19 runs on the weekend in the 4 games, which is not an otherworldly total. They scored 4, then 5, then 3, then 7. They won all the games. But they did that averaging fewer than 5 runs per game. 19 runs in 4 games. Now, 11 of the 19 were driven in by the 1, 2, 3 in the order, Lindor, Soto, and Alonso. So, yeah, that's kind of the portion that can beat you, and that's ultimately what happened this weekend. They beat them. But as you go through evaluating the various parts of the team, Palante's 6 innings, 4 runs, not great, but kept you in the game in a world in which your offense does more than produce 1 run. Miles Michaelis, nobody was doing backflips about his performance, but 4 2/3, 2 runs, get him out of there before things go south, 3rd time through. Sensible enough, but kept you in the game because through 5, you had given up 2 runs as a team. Matthew Liberatore was awesome. 6 2/3, 2 runs. He's been rock solid. And then today, another quality start, Sonny Gray. So only 2 of the 4 were quality starts, but the other 2, you were in the mix. Cardinal offense just didn't get enough done. 4 runs today, 4 runs on Friday, 1 on Thursday. 9 runs in the series. That's 2.25 per game. It's not remotely close. Yes, good pitching. I'll give you one of those games as a tip your cap game. But otherwise, it's like, all right, if this is just what we're going to say about it every time they get shut down, well, tip your cap or face some tough pitchers out there, grinded some at-bats. Not really, not as much. Not as impressed by the approach this weekend by the Cardinals. It's the 15 strikeouts in Game 2. It's the Griffin Canning, 8 strikeouts. They weren't quite on the Mets level, plain and simple. And what a series like that does to you is, as I alluded to earlier, you wake up and go, now, wait a minute, how many of these guys in this lineup can the Cardinals reliably count on to be plus hitters? Because we thought for a while there the answer was the majority of them. But you take Herrera out due to injury, you take Mason Lynn out due to injury, and you see the likes of Burleson, Walker, obviously Contreras has struggled. Those 3 plus Gorman on a downswing, Victor Scott on a heavy downswing, and Pages is slowing. That's suddenly more than half your lineup on a given day. And you can say Nootbaar is definitely cooled a little bit too. So, yeah, it's we'll see. I said more questions than answers for sure. A lot of questions you could ask, a lot of suggestions to be made, not a lot of answers when it comes to the offense. Really, really, really cooling off. And I think the bullpen's a bigger problem than I do the offense. And that's probably, if it continues, going to be what turns this season into the one that a lot of pessimists in the offseason said it was going to be. When you look at last year, people I really don't think fully appreciate just how good the bullpen was and how good Ollie Marmol was at managing it. The problem is you can't be good at managing a group of relievers if none of the relievers that you're managing are reliably getting their jobs done. Today, you brought in JoJo, Phil Maton, and Fernandez. I would say only Maton of the 3 got his job done. And even that's a generous read because he gave up a hit. But when you inherit somebody else's mess like that, I'm not going to pin that on Maton. He struck out 2 batters and he gave up 1 hit, allowing an inherited runner to score. Not really going to pin that on Maton too hard. But Romero didn't get his job done. A hit and a walk, a strikeout, and you say, all right, peace out. Somebody else's problem. I'm not saying he did it intentionally, but like those are the consequences of the failure on the mound. You lose games from it. Last year, guys like JoJo, Kittredge, Helsley, they were the trio, the triumvirate, as I labeled them. And they won the Cardinals a ton of games, and they made Oliver Marmol's job really easy when you were up by a run or 2. Which probably didn't happen often enough because the offense was, ranked 22nd in runs scored last year. But it happened enough to get the Cardinals to 83 wins. It was an 83-win team that vastly outperformed its expected win-loss record. How did that happen? The bullpen. What's the most fickle aspect of an MLB team from year to year that makes it very difficult to project? The bullpen. And yet we could project regression for this bullpen because of losing Kittredge and knowing that was going to be difficult to replace him. Interestingly enough, they have, knock on wood, so far replaced him pretty effectively with Phil Maton. 1 right-hander out, 1 comes in, 2 veterans. on short-term contracts, and Maton's doing a really nice job right now. But if you get regression from Jojo Romero, who's got a 4.7 ERA, if you get regression from Fernandez, and I'm here to tell you that you have gotten regression from Fernandez, his ERA is 11.25. Chris Roycroft did not step forward. He kind of stagnated, so he's back in Memphis. You're trying out other pieces and parts. We'll see about a guy like Matt Swanson. John King has not been quite as reliable as he was last year. The numbers aren't great there. We can go round and round. The bullpen is just not quite where it needs to be. And I think it really showed up in this series. They might have lost the game anyway, as I said. Do they still score in the top of the ninth if there's a little bit more pressure on the Mets to make sure that they don't give up a run? Do they use Ryan Stanek for that inning? Probably not, right? You probably say Diaz if it's a one-run game. But it's a 3-run, 4-run game at that point, 7-3. Excuse me. Yeah, not a 3-run game, 4-run game before the Cardinals scored in the ninth inning. So they felt fine with having Stanek out there and getting the job done. And he did. And the Cardinals lose. So it's not that you would have won if Fernandez had done his job, but it's just those little things adding up over and over again. The Lindor game where Fernandez gave up the homer to him, I'm telling you, it's more about what happened before that. That day they brought in 5 relievers, and John King, who got 1 out, was the only one that I could reliably say did his job that day. So that's sort of the spot that the Cardinals are in, and that's where Oliver Marmol's at right now, too. He can manage the bullpen that he's got, and they're just not quite on the level to be able to shut down especially a top 3 like the Mets. The Mets, to me, when they get deeper into the playoffs, their problem might be they've got 3 hitters, maybe 3.5, because you'll have some good moments from a Winker or a Vientos. But they've got Lindor, Soto, and Alonso, and they're still looking to see what the rest of that group is going to be. And it may be that they're just not quite deep enough. But during the regular season, in a series like this, they certainly were. They did it single-handedly. 11 of the 19 RBIs in the series. That trio had more RBIs in the series than the Cardinals had runs scored, period, as a team. They drove in 11. The Cardinals scored 9. That's all it was. That tells the story. And I think the part of that conversation is that's called star power. And yes, you can afford star power when your payroll is $330 million. The Cardinals have guys that are, paid to be their star power. Contreras, like I said, is coming along. Arenado, he was off today, but he's had an okay start to the year. Not dogging him. He's looked really good defensively, by the way. I've definitely seen Gold Glove caliber defense from Arenado. He has gobbled up everything like a vacuum and has made those off-balance throws. Been very impressed by his defense. But the star power offensively, you're looking for it. You're desperately searching for it if you're the Cardinals. And we'll see if they're able to find it, but the Mets had more of it, a lot more of it this weekend. And right now the Cardinals bullpen ranks 24th in ERA across MLB, 4.64. So that's not just your mind playing tricks on you. That's been a unit that hasn't gotten the job done, and it was a strength last year. That is the long and short of it. Yes, we can talk about the offense. That is a question mark. But last year, the Cardinals had a 3.64 bullpen ERA, 7th in baseball. It just went up by a run, and now they're 24th in baseball. They went from 3.6, what did I say, 3.64? Yeah, exactly a run north of that this year, 4.64, as of the conclusion of Sunday's series. So that's where the Cardinals are. They have an offense that has been declining game over game, series over series, after a strong start where we felt really good about the approach. And they have a bullpen that is not getting it done. And so to wait any longer to start changing out those pieces and parts, I think, is a signal of a lack of urgency. And maybe there is a lack of urgency within the front office because, again, they told you this was going to be a transition year. But they didn't say rebuild year, so I don't see why it shouldn't still matter, especially if you're trying to get folks back to Busch and getting butts and seats for when the team does play at home, because they have played pretty well there. I think the urgency to start swapping guys out in Memphis, shuttling, don't care that they're on the road. Fly them to Atlanta. Figure it out. It's time. Cardinals rotation, by the way, ranks 16th in baseball, 3.98. it's actually been pretty decent. I would not have pegged it for a sub-4 ERA necessarily coming into the year. I would have said right about 4, maybe 4.1, 4.2, because there were, a lot of guys that I thought might be right there around that number. But we've seen probably a little bit better version of Palante than you thought. I would have said high 3s for his ERA. Sonny, maybe about what we thought. Fetty, I'd have to look at the overall number, but maybe about what we thought. It's been Liberatore, frankly, that's been able to outperform, but I didn't have him penciled into my rotation. If I had, and you'd have told me that through 4 or 5 starts or whatever it's been, you'd have felt pretty good about him being there, I would have probably then said, oh, well, I mean, he probably does have a pretty good ERA because that's always been within him. We know the stuff is good. He had a good spring. So here he is, and we'll see if he can stick there. But, yeah, 3.98 ERA, especially how they started. That second time through the rotation was brutal. Outside of that, they're probably sub-3 as a rotation. Maybe even sub-2.5. Probably not after the Mets series, though. They weren't over the moon great against the Mets, but it was definitely good enough. And because of the offense, because of the bullpen, it wasn't even good enough to get one win. So we'll see. We'll see where they go from there. I was going to do down on the farm, and I don't even really think I'm going to in a full capacity simply because the Springfield Cardinals didn't even play today. But the Memphis Redbirds did, and people like the sounder, so screw it. Let's play the soundbite. We're going down on the farm. It's time to go down on the farm. Brought to you by Hastings Layers Premium Eggs.
You'll be happier than a jackass eating thistle.
Huh? Tried to talk myself out of it, and then I talked myself back into it. I love hearing myself moo. Anyway, Mason Wynn, not a lot going on compared to what he did the other day with the 2 home runs. He was 0 for 3 today, but did reach base twice via walk, and he was back in defensively at shortstop, which I think is maybe even more notable than anything else. No errors or anything. Prieto made an error. Nobody else. Matt Koperniak, his first home run of the season. That happened for Memphis. They lost 8-7 in 10 innings. Koperniak, we had talked about previously being off to a slow start. Still sub-200 batting average. But he'll get there. Hopefully he'll get there. Not a lot else to write home about. The Sam Roberts has really struggled. 2 2/3, 7 runs given up. But I told you about Riley O'Brien. Scoreless inning, 3 strikeouts. Ryan Ludus, Nick Anderson both contributed a scoreless inning as well. Those guys have ERAs between 3.8 and 4. So either of those you could end up seeing. Riley would be my choice, though. I would make that move for Fernandez and try to get him and Roycroft right because I think those guys have upside that you want to use. But right now, I just don't think it makes sense to continue it with Fernandez. That being said, I normally don't go as gung-ho with declaring my opinion of time to send this guy down unless I'm pretty sure they're going to do it. And I will say, in this case, I don't necessarily know for sure that they're going to do it. I said I think it's the move to make. I don't know that they will. We'll see. I'm not convinced that they're going to. And look, if they don't and Ryan Fernandez pitches a game in Atlanta and finds it and the command is back, because it's always been about the command, he's been walking guys way too often. And so, when he's dealing with that, and then you end up getting, a ball that falls in on you that's just kind of feels like bad luck, it is a point where you make your own luck eventually because you've walked too many guys to set up the scenarios that maybe come back to bite you. I believe it's been 5 walks in 8 innings this season for Fernandez. That's too many. It's too many. So get his command right, and I think he can help you again. But for now, I'd make that move. But Riley would be the option for me because you're just talking about pure upside. You're trying to find some guys who can develop into that 7th, 8th inning role. I'm not saying that he's necessarily going to come up and be a ton better in terms of the command. He's got another guy with great stuff that let me rephrase that. We haven't always seen him hone it yet, but honed it today. He seems to be throwing it well right now, and maybe that would be the way to go. But otherwise, that's the update from Memphis. Mason Wynn, he's hitting 182 with Memphis, but he's got an OPS over 1,000 from those 2 home runs. It may be that his only hits so far have been the home runs with Memphis. Trying to see if that's accurate. Yeah, I think that's right because it says 11 at-bats and a 182 average, which would be 2 for 11. And he's hit 2 homers. So there you go. Kind of a weird statistical oddity. Point is, Mason Wynn's going to be good to go. Get him on back up there. I don't think Sajaci should be going anywhere, and he won't be. I'm just going to tell you right now, he's not getting sent down. You can put it on the board. And if I'm wrong, I'll come back and tell you I was wrong. But there's just no way to justify it. An offense is performing this poorly, and you got a guy with a 9-something OPS. No, they're not sending him down. What they do instead could be interesting. It could be somebody where you go, all right, we need Sajaci in the lineup if we're going to keep him here, so send down somebody struggling that ostensibly, would be eating into Sajaci's time if he were here. That could be Gorman, but I also think they could go with a right-handed option to, maintain the balance there. So I don't have a great prediction as to who it's going to be. I cannot fathom it being Sajaci at this point. So we'll see, and we'll talk about it when it happens, whoever it ends up being. But otherwise, not a ton of answers for the Cardinals as they get set for the series in Atlanta, taking on the Braves Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, before a weekend series back at Busch. They will get that Thursday off day that they, I guess, could really use, but ideally you find a way to scratch out a series win before that. Doesn't get any easier. Braves, as we said, playing really well at home. Fetty versus Schwellenbach on Monday. Palante versus Strider, who has rejoined the Atlanta rotation on Tuesday. Good luck with that. Michaelis versus Elder on Wednesday. Maybe that's an advantage because Elder has struggled in his limited duty so far. Both ERAs in the 7s for those projected starters at 11:15 a.m. on Wednesday. So be ready for some breakfast baseball on Wednesday. Just a heads up there. That, though, is going to do it for this edition of the show. Appreciate you guys always for tuning in and for supporting the channel as you guys have for so many episodes at this point. I think we're over 750 episodes of B-Schaeff Daily. And the YouTube version has been probably several hundred the last couple of years. So thank you guys so much. Do really appreciate it, especially as you listen and stick with me through what's ostensibly been a hard time for the team. I don't really have a lot to do with that, but I will be here to talk about it, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. So thank you guys so much, and we'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.